Okay, so we'll continue where we left off in the last session. So if you would recall from our last session, we were looking at different types of charts that we can create in different scenarios. So based on the data, what we are trying to analyze or what we are trying to show. So yeah, so last time we completed distribution part, we have completed relationship part. We are about like halfway done on the comparison part on the top. So we compare all the different situations or data scenarios where we have to compare across time, over time. So today we'll cover the rest of it. We'll do the comparisons part among items, and we will also go to the composition and quickly finish those two parts. So let me zoom in a little here. So, okay. So first of all, I'll just toggle between, there are two variants of this chart. So some details are for some of the particular charts, some details are present better in one chart, and for other charts they are present in another better. So I'll just toggle between these two charts. They are pretty much similar, just the style is slightly different. Okay, so and I'll also use the same sample superstore data set. I've connected me right. Okay, so first of all, let's go to our first chart type in the comparisons. Okay, so if you see the comparisons, we have finished over time and across items. Okay, so this is like telling, as I said in the last session as well, so instead of comparing, hey, how are my sales moving across or changing over time, instead of saying, hey, how are my sales in each of these different product segments, how are my sales in each of these different regions, so that is like comparison across items. So and within that same, let's say we have few items that we want to compare with each other, and we were trying to see how many variables are we trying to compare in these categories. Are we trying to compare one variable, or we are trying to compare two variables, let's say sales and profit, both the variables at a time on these categories. So so there we have different cases, and similar branches are provided here. So if you're trying to compare among items, one variable per item, and there are few categories. Okay, so let me actually, it's slightly confusing in the chart here. Let me just quickly jump to Tableau and give an example of the same. Let's say I've connected to my sample superstore data, and I want to I have a product field which basically tells me what category, subcategory, and manufacturer that this particular product comes from, and I also have few other category fields, which is called segment. So which segment does the consumer who purchased that product belong to? Does it belong to a consumer segment, or a corporate segment, or some other segment? There are three segments overall. So if you see consumer, corporate, or home office, the three segments overall. So let's say if I want to compare sales, okay, since there is only one variable for the time being, is let's take sales as our variable of interest, and we want to compare sales of each of these segments, okay, across categories. So that, what I mean by that is, let me I'll take my segment. So category, and I'll drop my sales into here. Right, so what it's doing here is, within each category, so there is a furniture category, the office supply category, and technology category. It's giving me how my sales across different consumer segments are varying. So within furniture, lots of sales is majorly coming from consumer segment, and next corporate, and likewise. So let me just color this by segment, or yeah, I think that. So each color is a particular segment. So this is what the first chart that we are trying to look at in the this chart guide is trying to show. So we are looking at one variable per item. There are few categories and few items. So let me explain what I mean by that. So there are few categories. What are categories here? The category field here itself, the one on the furniture, supplies and technology, this itself is our category, acting like a category field. And within each category I have few items. What are the items here? The segment consumer, corporate and home office. So obviously, as I said, anything that is less than 4 or at max 5 we can consider as a number as few. So since this is 3, which is well and good. So under each category there are few items, and we are trying to compare one metric, one variable for each of these items. So this sort of a bar chart typically is sufficient for that sort of scenario. Now let's say in the same few categories section, instead of few items per each category, let's say we have many items. In that case we have to go with something called a vertical bar chart. So something called a vertical bar chart here, as we can see. So it's also pretty straightforward to create. Let's say I'll duplicate this, and what I'll do is, so I'll keep the category same, I'll remove segment, and I'll add subcategory. Okay, if you see instead of category also, let me take out that, and let's just go with maybe segment. So that way, just a minute for So if you see here, let me color it accordingly. So with here our category becomes our segment field, and the items becomes the number of subcategories in each of those segments. So you can see there are at least a 12, which is far beyond what our limitation for a word few. So in this sort of scenario, this type of a chart wouldn't make much sense, or it's easy to interpret. So what we have to go with is something called a vertical bar chart. So what we have to do is this and this. So that will give us for each of the segment, consumer and corporate and home office, we have now all the 12 subcategories splitting the sales accordingly. So this is far better to interpret than the previous chart, and also visually more little more appealing than far more appealing in fact than the previous chart. So this is a vertical bar chart. This is, so you understand the situation. Whenever there are few items to compare across categories, we'll go with this one, and whenever we have multiple items, we opt for this one. And going back to our, let's say instead of few categories, let's say if we have many categories, okay, in that case we kind of go with the grid kind of chart. Let's quickly look at what that is.
Jagdish, I think that is also called as a table lens view, right? What you just built just now for the many categories.
This one?
This one. I think it's also called as a table lens view.
Table lens view. Okay. Okay. I'm not aware of it. Okay. Table lens. Okay. Good point. So I think we have, okay. So moving on to the next one, we have many categories section. Here now our categories field, as earlier they were only less than 3 or 4. Now they are also become more than that. So we call something called a table with embedded charts. So let's see how to create that. So let's get back here, open a new sheet. Let's select our fields, for example. Okay, let's say I have segment as one of my category. I have 3 fields there, and let's say I also have my category, which also holds 3 values. And let's say take one more just for the exam, for this sort of a chart. Let's say we are trying to compare not only across these 2 categories, but we have to compare across one more category. Let's say maybe a region. Okay, let me quickly make the chart. So let's say for each segment I want to look at, okay, I think I did that for each segment. across each region. Okay, I want to look at my sales. Where are my sales? I'll drop them in here. So I got my bars. Now let's say if we have to include one more field, which is category, and I'll just place it here. Okay, and let me color this by this one, category, and let's just hide this for the time being. Show header. Okay, tab new, and let's just let me do a couple of formatting and get back to how to read the chart. So this is what table grid chart normally looks like. So what's happening here is we have three dimensions. One is segment, one is region. Segment is going across column, so each column that we see is a particular segment, and region is going across rows, so each region is a particular region. I'm sorry, each row is a particular region, and the category is kind of displayed in the form of a color. So in this particular 1 by 1 place in this 3 by 4 matrix, so we can see how the sales in consumer segment from central region are placed across. Let me just pull out the labels in each of the category fields. So this is when we want to compare across different multiple many categories. So as of now, so our region is kind of like 4. If you have any other field which is more than 4, you can opt for this kind of a situation where you create a grid and show the visualization accordingly. So this is called table with embedded charts. So now let's say, so these are the 3 categories, and let's say where we are only comparing one variable per each of these different few categories or many categories. Let's say we want to compare multiple variables. Okay, instead of one variable across the categories, we want to compare let's say 2 variables. How do we do that? So there is a chart called variable width column chart. Let's quickly go to Tableau. Okay, and let's say I want to create the same chart. In fact, segment, category. Let me take the same chart and try and yeah. So as of now, I can see that hey, I'm splitting my sales across each of these category and segment. Let's say I want to include one more metric in addition to the sales. Let's say profit. What I can do is, as we already once slightly discussed it in one of our in the last session, we can use these other dimensions to a visualization, either color or size, normally to bring in our the effect of a third variable. Let's say, for example, if I bring my profit to color, okay, then it says basically, hey, wherever the darkest shade is there, it's highly profitable segment, and highly profitable what we call the intersection, and wherever it is lightest, they are the least profitable. So you can use color accordingly, or if not color, normally it is recommended to go with width. So you can put it in size and adjust the size to optimal level. So let's say maybe entire view. Yep. So we can see now each of these bars they are telling information about sales and profit. So the length of the bar represents the sales. So if it's higher, that means this particular bar is more there are more sales here than here, but if you see, though this bar and this bar, though this one has higher sales, it's not than this particular consumer sales in office supplies, it's not as profitable as the same one. So this is having higher width, that means this particular section is having higher profit. So yeah, whenever we want to compare two or more variables, we can have to use this sort of additional dimensions we have, whether color or size, and we can go for this sort of thing. We can even include third variable using our color option as well, just in case if we are not so keen on having color distinguished by segment. So let's go back to our chart. So these are the comparison across items. So 4 types basically: single variable, few or categories, many categories, and 2 variables across categories.